very good in timing as well.
Yeah.
So great. So in order to understand really the benefits that you have with AFM, you have to understand sand or the disadvantages of sand. And sand is a very good mechanical filter that we know for many, many years, but it also has disadvantages. And one of them, it's also bioactive. Bacteria easily can grow on this, and this leads to some problems. And let's talk about this biology of sand filters and the main problems. Shall I take this, Philip?
Yeah, I think it's your favorite subject,
Yeah,
so maybe you do it.
Yeah.
The heterotrophs and autotrophs, right?
Yeah, I learned a little bit.
Yeah.
That's not my knowledge, really. This is coming from Howard. You know, in water, you have different bacteria. You have heterotroph bacteria. Heterotroph bacteria are bacteria who are taking organics as their food source and produce inorganics. Autotrophs are just the opposite. They're using inorganics and produce organics. Heterotroph bacteria, for example, Pseudomonas, they can grow very quickly. You know, if the conditions are good, 30 degrees of water temperature, there is enough food, they double every 30 minutes. So it goes really exponential. So all this, what we heard now in the last few months, so really exponential growth if the conditions are good. And for example, these Pseudomonas, you know, which are the pioneers of building up the biofilms, you know, they're in the water and maybe there is oxidation. They can be easily oxidized with oxidants, with chlorine or another oxidants, and they want to survive. So they try to reach as quick as possible a surface that is in contact with the water, so a wet surface. And that will happen within a few seconds. And the moment where they attach to a surface of a wet surface, they secrete a mucus, a slime, to protect themselves against chlorine oxidation. They want to survive.
That's actually the biofilm. Yes, that's the biofilm you see and feel.
Yeah, that's what you call a biofilm. This bacteria covered by this slime, that's a biofilm. And this biofilm becomes very resistant against chlorine. And, you know, even very high concentration, here we wrote 50 ppm, which is an excessive amount of chlorine, you know, because the chlorine it cannot penetrate the biofilm. It has to oxidize through the biofilm from outside to inside. And by this, it's losing concentration, you know, and out of these billions and trillions of bacteria, even if you have a very high chlorine concentration, you will always have few survivors. Usually the ones, you know, which are strongest bugs, you know, the one which are very effective in producing biofilm, and then they are alone and they have all the food and the nice temperature available. That's a bit like Robinson. Yeah, maybe Robinson is not good. And then they grow. So again, very, very quickly. And what has this to do with the filter media? Yeah, the sand is the biggest surface in contact with the water that you have in such a system. You know, you have a little bit of piping, but you also have the filter media. And 1 cubic meter of sand has 3,000 square meters of surface. So it's huge. It's 95, 98, 99% maybe of the surface that you have in.
And very important, that's not only in filter media, that also it continues. So there is a large filter area coming if you have an RO system from the membrane systems. Yeah. So that's another growth area for biofilm. And most of you who join here, they know about the problems. We will actually come to that in the next session next week. But anyway, I like to continue that.
Yeah, but also, you know, when you mentioned this, you know, this is also what we talked about. You know, very often you say, well, I have to chlorinate the sand filter to keep him free of bacteria. That will not work. It will not work. You know, often you see over a certain period of times, you know, over years, that chlorinated system, especially if they are on the same level chlorinated, that you get an even bigger biofilm problem than you have a low or non-chlorinated system. Through this process of natural selections, yeah, you kill the weak box and you leave the room to the strong box.
That's very important. Yeah.
So if you do chlorination, do me a favor, do shock chlorination. And then, you know, bacteria do not like they like to have it always the same conditions, like we do.
Humans,
right?
huh?
Like the humans, yes,
yeah.
we try to
They like
keep
their comfort zone, huh?
Yeah, comfort zone.
So what's the problem then, really? The problem with biofilm in sand?
You want to take that?
Yeah, should I?
Yeah.
Okay. So the problem that we get when biofilm grows in sand is that it leads to clumping of the sand grains. They start to stick together, and ultimately you have channels. You can press a few times. You have channels that are starting to form through the filter bed. So this leads to a very inconsistent and unreliable filtration. It can happen that unfiltered water actually gets through the filter. Yeah, and this is obviously something that we need to avoid.
I mean, that's like highways. So water goes through these highways.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So you have turbidity that increases, that spikes up and goes down. It's very inconsistent.
Yeah. And yeah, also what you see here these channels, you know, and from time to time when these channels are opening, you have a breakthrough of this biofilm. And this is when your product water gets very high turbidity. This is when you have this breakthrough of this.
Yeah.
Now you will maybe say, well, Dominic and Philip and Jochen, this is not happening. When I change my sand, you know, it's working perfectly for 3 months. And this is true. Problem starts after 3, 6, 12 months, depending on the temperature, depending on the load, depending on the backwash regime that you're having. But it's starting a little bit later. And why is this? This is because of these autotroph bacteria. Because when they move into the system, they produce the food source for the heterotrophs. And this is when this biofilm problem starts to become a lot more dramatic. And they are not doubling every 30 minutes, but every 10 to 12 days. And this is why this takes a lot longer to move them in. But if then they are in, you know, it's
becomes very dynamic. Huh?
Very dynamic.
The big issue is you get more bacteria out at the end as you get in.
Yeah,
and that can be a big problem in other processes downstream.
Yeah, that really can happen. You know, if you measure the bacteria level in your raw water and your product water, and they are in your product water higher than in your raw water, that's not really good. And then, of course, you can do with chlorine dioxide and chlorine and whatever to avoid all these problems: turbidity increase, biomass increase, suspended solids and biomass discharges into filtered water. No reliable filtration.
Yeah.
There is an easy way to avoid this. You know, in order to solve the problem, the easy one is use a bioresistant filter media. And there is one I really can recommend you, and it's called AFM.
Yeah.
Maybe you're surprised.
Yeah. Okay.
Philip, please explain us why this is.
Okay, so how is AFM bioresistant? How does this work, right? We mentioned a couple of minutes ago, we use only green and brown glass. This is very important because green and brown glass contain metal oxides, chromium oxide, iron oxide. And on the surface of the grain, there's a catalytic reaction that now takes place, where these metal oxides react with oxygen in the water. And this forms small amounts of free radicals.
This is what you see here. These are the hydroxyl radicals. So you have H2O, the water. You need a certain amount of oxygen, not a lot. 2 ppm of dissolved oxygen is enough. But if you have this on this surface, and remember, in the activation process, we increase the surface by a huge factor. Together with the metal oxides, you're creating these free radicals.
Yeah,
I show it again because I like this.
Yeah.
This is from Flo. He's also here. This is what you're turning. It's a small amount, you know, it's a small amount, but it's really enough to protect these bacteria who want to reach the surface of AFM, to attach, to build up a biofilm, because they want to survive, to protect this. They cannot move in.
If I want to jump in quickly here, it's very important. This is the activation which we make through our production process. So that's not for clear, that's not for all other glasses. Just that people don't misunderstand. That's not a normal glass, that's our activated surface area.
Yeah, I mean, first thing, as a raw material, you have to have the metal oxides in. If glass manufacturers are using green and brown glass only, that already gives a benefit. But the other is because you increase the surface by such a huge factor, and this is a surface reaction. You know, if you increase the surface by a factor of 100, obviously you have 100 times more free radicals, which protect you against this biocanalization.
Yep.
Yeah, I think we are doing it pretty good as a team.
Yeah, that looks good. Yes, and actually, just going here to the topic of biogrowth on surface areas. Here, a picture of sand, clean, new, fresh sand on the left side, and after a couple of days, you see the growth of bacteria. That's normal for every surface area, as we explained before. So after 3 days, you have a colonization of bacteria. If you take then AFM, also fresh AFM on the left side, and then here in this example, after 5 years, there is no bacteria growth. So we prove that this hydroxy radical generation on the surface area really protects from biofouling. And most importantly, why do we want to have this? This is because we don't want to have these problems of biofouling, clumping in the system, and unreliable filtration. So we improve this dramatically by using AFM.
Yeah, and now your engineers will, can you measure the hydroxyl radicals? No, you can't. But we can do what one of our customers in New Zealand has done a couple of years ago, actually. You know, he let run one system, I think it was a drinking water system, you know, with one filter with AFM and exactly the same filter, one with sand. And he operated them for 6 or 9 months. And then after a decent backwash, he took out 5 grams of filter media, put it in sterilized water, and then put it on the Petri dish. And this is the difference in the germ counts, you know, 18 to 3.6, which is a factor of 1 million. Now, 1 million is a big number. I always say a factor of 1,000, and then you come and say, Dominic, you're wrong. It's not 1,000, it's 1 million. Okay, I'm happy to make these mistakes, to get these corrections.